I now call Stuart Stevenson to wind up the debate. Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And like members across the chamber, I'll thank Liam MacArthur for securing time to discuss this important issue. Let me assure Mr MacArthur and others that I appreciate that strong arguments will be put forward and have been put forward against the introduction of car parking charges at Kirkwall Airport and elsewhere. Indeed, I'm very conscious of the lively debate that took place when car parking charges were extended in Kirkwall town centre to include another 4 car parks to improve parking turnover with the highest charge of £2.40 a day. Yes, I will.
I thank the Minister for taking an intervention. I think I'm right in saying that the proposal was for 4 car parks and the decision was ultimately taken for 2. So just in order to clarify the record, I wouldn't want them to mislead the Parliament.
Well, the record is now clear and I'm sure the member would not seek to mislead me or anyone else in that matter. 2 car parks it is. I simply make the point, of course, that the circumstances in which different bodies find themselves mean that they have to look very carefully at the options that are in front of them. I make the general point that Highlands has 11 airports. I have flown personally into all of them, 4 as a pilot, a number personally, some as a minister. So I absolutely know that there is a huge diversity in the airports that we have across the network and that we have to have appropriate responses to the needs of each one. I heard the discussions of what airfares are. It's absolutely correct. In our island communities there isn't much, if any, competition for the provision of services, so one's choice is much less. As a minister, when I was going to Poznan for COP14 about 15 months ago, the initial quote from the government's travel advisers was it would be £1,200. I didn't think that was the right amount of money. Spent 20 minutes on the internet and got it down to around £200. Mind you, it did mean arriving at 3:15 in the morning at Poznan, but I did think that was a sensible thing for the minister to do, but he shouldn't have had to do it. Less choices for islanders, I absolutely accept. And let me acknowledge the value of the air discount scheme introduced by the previous administration. I've been pleased to continue to give support to that very important scheme. I'm not terribly sure that the references to FOIs were accorded with my understanding of what went on. I think we've had some useful clarification from Kevin Dunyan, the Information Commissioner, about whether documents or information may be sought, and we have adjusted our policies accordingly. And in relation to car parking, I think it is important that we do have a consistent policy. But having a consistent policy does not ineluctably lead you to necessarily having identifiable outcomes. It's very clear that the distance that Sunbury Airport is from any major centres of population in Shetland create a particular dynamic that will need to be considered. Alistair Allen makes the quite legitimate point, which I acknowledge, that there aren't many tourists in the car parks of our major island airports. They are essentially local people, and there is significant difficulty in travelling to airports. Peter Peacock, I think like Liam, made reference to NHS patients. Let me just quote from a letter from Ingo's Line to, among others, the chair of the Kirkwall Consultative Committee, which at question 2 says no charge for hospital patients. Now, I accept that's a consultation and that is a suggestion of what was happening. I would be somewhat surprised, whatever outcome we achieve, if we were to wish to charge hospital patients, or for that matter blue badge holders. And indeed, the suggestion in the letter from Ingo's Line is that 24 hours parking would be £3, broadly pretty much the same as parking in the centre of Kirkwall. We have challenging financial times. The board of Highlands are responsible for running the company. The Government Minister, myself, acts on behalf of the public as the owner of the shares, but under the Companies Act it's very clear that we appoint the board members to take decisions. Now, I'm sure that Hyle will be watching this debate, will be very much aware of the interest that's being taken. I'm very pleased that we have the consultations that are now going on. It's important that the board, in circumstances of reduced demand and hence reduced income, that they do look at every opportunity to balance the books, make sure that they are discharging their responsibilities. We do have to... Yes, I will.
Mary Scanlon.
You mentioned, I'm sorry, it was about a minute ago, the consistent approach. And in that consistent approach, would you agree that a central factor would be the option or whether or not there are alternative public transport systems, such as I outlined in Inverness, and also the critical factor of the sustainability of the airport, given a potential reduction in demand?
Minister.
Yes, I do absolutely acknowledge that. I will say that the investment in new parking facilities at Kirkwall has been an excellent thing to have done as part of the redevelopment of the terminal. I do note that at peak times the car park is full, in fact overfull, to the extent that people are now parking on the grass verges and elsewhere. That isn't disconnected from the whole point about everyone who parks at the airport, almost everyone who parks at the airport contributes to the revenue generated from that airport. But it is precisely those balancing issues that the Hyle have to take into account. It is, and I made reference specifically to the location of Sunborough, which presents special challenges because of its distance. I know how much a taxi journey to Sunborough is because on ministerial duties I've had to do it. If the presiding officer is content, I'll keep taking interventions, presiding officer.
Well, I don't know about keep. We'll take this one.
Well,
Liam McCarthy.
No, I'm happy.
Thank the Minister and indeed the Deputy Presiding Officer for allowing this intervention. The Minister's referred to the distance from, between Sunborough and Lerwick, the main centre of population. He'll appreciate that Orkney has been described as the fried egg, and therefore there are other challenges presented, not least having another centre of population in Stromness and indeed out in the West Mainland, but also in the wider Isles, which have use of the airport but don't have access to the bus service. And so constant reference to distance of Kirkwall as opposed to Lerwick to the airport, slightly disingenuous, as indeed is the reference to car parking charges within Kirkwall town centre, which are irrelevant to very many of my constituents.
I merely refer to Sunborough because there is a very clear, specific difference, but each circumstance at each airport, Stornoway, Kirkwall and Sunborough, are matters that need to be considered. I don't wish at this stage to preempt the outcomes that may come. Hyle has in its remit a social aspect that it has to consider. I would not encourage the board to take any decision that meant it was difficult for people to travel to the airport, to use air services, and I'm sure that the board will take tent of that being said by me and the expressions of others. We are financially supporting Hyle to a substantial degree, some 27 million in the air discount scheme, which benefits many people in Orkney and the Highlands and Islands with high levels of take-up, probably lower ones in Caithness and Sutherland. I'd like to see these rise, is a further 6 million. Very substantial support. The Hyle Board has reflected on the need to consult more fully. I very much welcome the fact that they've done that. I think there are lessons to be learned from the initial consultation, that these decisions are not ones which are abstract decisions. They touch on the real lives of peoples in our islands. They are therefore properly should involve the consultative committees. The board, of course, has a wider fiduciary duty to make sure that it is supporting economic and social aims for Highlands and Islands, must ameliorate any potential impact were charges to be introduced, make sure that they can explain the policies that they implement. I've just realised there's one final thing I wish to say to Mary Scanlon, just to assure her that the planning processes for Dalcross Station are proceeding apace. I think this has been a very useful debate. I wait with interest to see what Hyle takes out of the consultations it is undertaking. I hope they will listen very carefully to the input that they receive from this debate and elsewhere. Ultimately, it is for them to take decisions, but ultimately they will take notice of what is said elsewhere, I'm absolutely sure.
I now close this meeting of Parliament.